The 3 elf boys sat silently, nervously. They were uncertain why they had been chosen, only certain that they had. They were young, especially for elves, each younger than their 6th spring. The eldest of these 3 was a long, brown-haired boy with hard eyes named Rydell. He knew that the tall elf before them was someone to be feared. On the big elf's back was a grand-looking cloak that brushed the floor. As Rydell looked at the cloak, his eyes strangely hurt. The big elf shifted subtly, and as he did, the cloak shimmered, blending with its surroundings as he moved. Rydell was in awe, but the cloak paled compared to the object dangling at the big elf's hip. A sword like out of the stories. The big elf stood with one hand on a green-handled blade at his waist as he talked with an elf with a white beard. Much older, this one wore fancy white robes with green embroidered vines and leaves. Rydell had seen clothes like that before when his mother had pointed to the king and queen as they'd strode through the dapple-lit forest. The 2 elves were whispering now, but their words were loud enough to be heard by Rydell's keen ears. Perhaps they didn't know or didn't care, but he listened as the hardened, younger-looking one asked, "King Gaius wishes this? You're certain?" The elf wasn't just tall. He was big. Rydell had seen strong elves like the Terma, but this man's simple green clothing didn't hide his bulging arms and thick neck. He must have been the biggest elf Rydell had ever seen. Middling in years for an elf, perhaps Rydell's father's age, but the tough look on his face made him look much older still. Rydell had never seen anyone look so mean. He towered over them and cast occasional unsettling glances at the 3 boys who sat on their knees in the green glade, trembling. On Rydell's right, the little black-haired boy sniffled, as if holding back tears, while the blond-haired boy to his left held a distant, wide-eyed gaze, as if he was imagining being someplace very far from here.
"From his mouth to my ears," said the old elf dutifully. "It is the king's own wish."
The big elf growled in frustration. "Why now? Why bring back the old ways now? We are at peace, fractured and divided from the other great kingdoms, but at peace. What is he preparing for?" The old elf shook his head, fine straight white beard swaying.
"I can't say, but King Gaius is not one to frighten easily. You know this above all others, Trinidin."
Trinidin? Was that the big elf's name? King Gaius. Rydell knew that name too. Lord of all the elves and ruler of the great kingdom of Leaf. King Gaius ordered this? Rydell's mother hadn't been able to tell him anything. She had just said she loved him very much, to trust that, and listen to the old elf. That was yesterday. Shortly after, the old one had come and collected him, tears in his mother's eyes as she had watched him leave. They had walked in silence for what felt like ages until they reached the green glade and the mean-looking Master Trinidin. The other 2 boys had been waiting when he had arrived. "You know more than you're saying, Lorsan," growled the mean-looking elf. The old elf, Lorsan, sighed.
"If I had to guess, the king sees something on the horizon we cannot. These boys will be needed one day. Either way, they are yours now," Lorsan said gravely, nodding his head to Rydell and the other 2 at his side. "Their provisions will be cared for. Their training and all else is yours to oversee." Trinidin grunted at last. "So be it. I will do what I can. But when I'm done with them, they won't be boys. They might not even be elves."